Welcome to our January town hall, the first one of the new year. I'll just note right away that that kind of an exciting time for us at WestGrid because we're about to have a new CEO who's joining us on Monday, a guy named John Longbottom from Victoria. I won't say much more because maybe at the next town hall we'll introduce him more formally and start. But this is great news for us, and we're looking forward to working with him. So the usual admin end of things, ask questions to info@westgrid.ca, or you can use the chat here. We can work with any of that, and feel free to ask questions during the presentation. We're kind of open. We've got a few things to cover, I think, this month. The usual, which I think we're going to have now on almost every WestGrid town hall for a while, is the Embryo updates. Remember, that's the new organization that's being set up to take over from Compute Canada. I've got some notes about that. We had a WestGrid survey. I'll do a slide there. A exciting new competition for some of our developer support, which we'll work on. I've got the usual operations, a bit of user training, and then if there's time at the end, I will very briefly go over a few slides on some of our cloud investigations. So I'll dive right in at the moment. So the Embryo, remember, that is the new digital research infrastructure organization, and they are still looking for a suitable title for that organization. And at the moment, we've been referring to it as Embryo. Sounds good. DRI. And for those of you, just briefly, it was, I think, 2 years ago we got $500 million for a digital research infrastructure organization, top down from Cabinet. That has fed through ISED, the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, ISED. And about a year ago, they said that the approach they were going to take was to set up a new arm's-length, not-for-profit operation, corporation, which would be charged with setting up or continuing to provide digital research infrastructure to Canadian researchers. So that was great news, that the money was there and the organization was going to get started. And over the summer, last summer, it did get started, was incorporated. The inaugural board was appointed, and the inaugural board was there to set up the governance structure, membership, and to appoint the first real board. Sorry, that was an applicant board. The first board will be the inaugural board. So that's been happening. There were consultations over last autumn. I think a few of you were there. We mentioned this at the last WestGrid town hall update as well. So a few things have happened essentially since December. The new organization and ISED are moving forward very aggressively on trying to set up the whole migration and the plan from Compute Canada, the existing Compute Canada, to this new organization, and change all the funding models, etc. So the big thing that's been going on is the recruitment for the inaugural board of directors. The applications closed January 13th. I gather informally from talking to the applicant board that they've got a very strong slate of applications, way more than they expected. So there's quite an operation going on to whittle that down and figure out who will be on the inaugural board. And the other end of it was that the membership details were there. The board applications are closed, and they're working on those. The member organization was set up in the membership model, and the applications for members closed January 24th. I mean, I think you can still ask to be a member, but not for that initial set. And I heard, again, sort of through the grapevine a bit, that almost all institutions in Canada have signed up to be members of of Enrio. So that was great. Say about 300 institutions. And there are 2 classes, full or associate members, but I don't know anything about the breakdown or how that's going. So I'm sure they'll make more formal announcements in the not too distant future. And I heard that the plan is to have a mid-March inaugural general meeting where the members can then formally appoint the board, and then we'll have a board. However, in that top slide, on that top panel up here, there was a big Ottawa meeting in the second week of January where I said got everybody together. That was Enrio, senior reps like Vice President Research and such from the host sites, regional chairs and CEOs, Canary, and the research data management end of things. The issue, of course, is that Enrio is getting up and running but isn't there yet, so is not at the point where they have a full CEO and a senior management suite and still appointing the board of directors. So they're not at the stage of being able to do a lot of serious planning yet. But the timeline is short because the key timeline is that our existing CFI operations grant ends on March 31st, 2022. So the handover to the new organization has to occur before that. So that's 2 years, more or less, and we need to get started. So I said the ministry has been taking quite a strong part currently in that planning and development, and that was what this meeting really was. It was to get us all up to speed, to give some idea of what I said wanted done and how they wanted it done, and starting to think about who would do it, because that's going to be the hard part, is that we're all in Compute Canada really busy just keeping the whole systems going and doing the support and all the things we usually do. So finding time to replan how's Enrio, what the staffing is going to be like on Enrio, those kinds of things. So it was a good meeting, but mostly sort of top-level stuff with ISED giving us overall a bit approaches and telling us about where they wanted to go, and then the rest of us asking questions as we went through. A lot of discussion. One thing, yeah, okay, so there's that quick update there. I said I think expects in the next little while, like next 6 months or so, to have a stronger part in the whole planning process. But then as Enrio gets going, they're going to hand that over to Enrio, and it's Enrio's responsibility to develop the actual plans. So the next steps on this is what I think in the fourth bullet point, a concept that got talked about quite a lot, is that we are moving towards a service delivery model where the money flows through Enrio, and Enrio decides what services should be funded. So that's the big thing, development of this service delivery model. That's essentially all the details of exactly what Enrio will provide to researchers. And I noted there, roles, responsibility of institutions, what the regions are going to do, how the provincial matching works. That's the big model. And along the way, therefore, one wants a corporate plan. It's supposed to be community input from a researcher council. Over this summer, a needs assessment, strategy development, so things going on there. And in that third bullet point, that's supposed to be presented to ISED in a year, in January 2021, and then the whole transition itself should then occur from January 2021 to that 2022 date. So that was, so ISED's got some timelines in mind, and I think they're quite reasonable. They're aggressive, absolutely. There's a lot of stuff to do between now and then. So part of this then that will be that the Compute Canada Federation will document and advise. So we'll have to, in the next probably 6 months or so, define exactly what we do and write down to some detail stuff in preparation for Enrio. And hopefully Enrio will be up and running at that point, and also might be some funding for resources that we need to do this. And we'll coordinate, facilitate that kind of thing, and build it up. So yeah, okay, and the 2 bullet points at the bottom I think I've covered. ISED had some sort of very top-level things to sort of mission, philosophies, approaches to the thing. So, of course, the top one is that they don't want this this transition to affect researchers, if at all possible. So, there's, of course, going to be some effects, but the service delivery model should provide what we provide now in the infrastructure to researchers, and with minimal disruption. It's supposed to be community driven, so there are certainly a lot of ideas around outreach and doing these kinds of town halls, getting out there over next summer to ask all the research communities in Canada for their input. And of course, Compute Canada Federation is to work with NGO. And what kept coming, I've already talked about this business of service. This came up again and again and again, that the transition is from the sort of project-based approach that we've had with CFI, and that's that every 5 or 7 or whatever years, CFI holds a big competition, and in most cases we are the only ones invited to propose, but we propose what's going to happen in the next 5 years, and we get funding through CFI. The new model is this more service-driven model where their continuous funding gets given to NGO, and NGO sets it up over to develop what the services are going to be. And that includes buying the hardware, doing continuous updates, greenfield kind of stuff, experimental things, plus the basic software services or soft services that we might want, like the central database and those kinds of things. So that's, I think, in a nutshell, that's the phrase that I keep hearing, going from project-based to service-based. I kind of like this. It's great that we should be that NGO, that the funding will go through NGO to fund all these services, and maybe we can expect therefore a bit more formality in the service level agreements, for instance, with folks like SFU to provide the CEDAR infrastructure, the system there, and some more clarity on how we do this kind of thing, and this simplifies the funding model quite a lot. So I kind of like this, and that came up quite a lot in the meetings in January. So I think that's about where we are right now. Still tons to do, and this time next year, I hope, in theory, we should have a detailed plan, and ISED should have a chance to have a look at it and make their comments after a lot of consultation with users, with researchers, with staff, with the technical folks. It's going to be an interesting time. There is a website, the engagedri.ca, where they have their formal communications, and feel free to ask questions. And I think they're certainly willing to take input right now on many of these concepts and ideas if you want to get in there. So any questions on that? Yeah, it's a very exciting time, and we will have an update, I think, every town hall as we go along. Yeah, the next one is our survey. So WestGrid sets out its own user satisfaction survey most years, and I think the survey is closing today. So we haven't done much yet, just looked at some of the basics, but and some of the stuff where it's not really very new, but for instance, that second bullet point, what do most respondents think our rating is very important? Well, now somebody just joined. Okay, and compute cycles and storage. So yes, we need as many CPUs and storage as we can get, and this is feeding into the whole rack thing that we just cannot satisfy everybody's request. And this year it's going to be rough. So I don't think that's a big surprise, but it's the kind of data that we need to feed back into the NGO and that kind of thing, where we can say, yeah, we really need to keep our infrastructure up to date and increase it if possible. And then the next lot of things are sure, advanced user training, online user support. Yes, support's important, and we need to continue to do that, and we will. And then long-term data storage, which was interesting. I think that's an increase, but I'll have to look at some of the details on that kind of numbers. And about 9%, 90% are pretty satisfied with the workshops, training opportunities, all those kinds of things that WestGrid does. So if all goes well, maybe the next town hall will be able to focus on what we've learned and what the any issues that we uncover and what we're going to do about them. Oh yes, and Jana's added our little slide that the survey closes, so feel free to go there and add suggestions and do the survey. The more we get, the better. Right, at this point, I'm going to hand over to Okena Opala, our senior software developer, and he's going to announce a kind of nifty little idea that we've got for a competition. So over to you, Okena. I'll handle the slides.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm going to talk about the WestGrid Developer Support Competition. This competition is the first round and is the equivalent of a half FTE for 6 months. Additional or ongoing resources may be available on a fee for service basis, depending on the requirements of the project. But the competition would provide free resources as a contribution from WestGrid to the Western Canadian academic institutions. If you've got a research project that we could help you with, and you've got a research project that your ideas could help the wider research community and beyond, and you need kind of technical software development implementation help and expertise, WestGrid have a developer team with those kind of expertise that can help you. When we're looking, the kind of projects we're looking at are scientific gateways, and these can range from web platforms and portals, and any other things that link to access channels to HPC resources, and in one way or the other enables access to analysis applications or any kind of research pipelines. Next slide, please. So this is kind of like new for WestGrid, the WestGrid program, and we are opening up to like a broad range of projects. So generally, we're looking for projects that will suit our expertise as a team, and have some kind of defined objectives that can be reasonably expected to be completed within a certain time frame. We will review these applications on a case-by-case basis, and maybe reach out to applicants if there is need for more clarity, and to determine feasibility, practicality, and value to the research community. So the applicants that we're looking at, we're open to researchers, research groups from, a higher educational institution within Western Canada, Manitoba, Saskatoon, Alberta, BC. And, these projects, like I said, we're looking at things that that can leverage a lot of the Compute Canada infrastructure like LDAP, the cloud resources, HPC pipelines, and things like that. Next slide, please. So how do you apply? The application process for now, it's going to be very informal. So we are expecting more rounds in the future. There will be more of these developer competitions in the future. So we're looking, to receive, 1-2 pages, few pages of a quick description of what your project is all about. We will probably contact applicants if we want to understand a little bit more and things like that. So like the slide says, name, position, institution, contact information, just a brief synopsis of what your project goals are. Brief descriptions, what kind of tasks. If you could break them down to just kind of user stories and things like that, that would be ideal. An overview, just a few sentences, what you're looking to create, the kind of scientific gateways, things like that. Yeah, so you just need to email it to Patrick, who's the head of operations at WestGrid, and yeah, surely he'll get back to you. So next slide, please. So like yeah, so we're calling out today, the 31st of January, for the projects. Letting you guys know. We're looking, the deadline for the applications will be end of next month, which is the 28th. Like I said, just 1-2 pages proposal. Just email it to Patrick, and then we'll start reviewing them early March, and then you'll be successful applicants will be contacted in March. So I look forward to kind of working with you. We're really excited about this opportunity because it's an opportunity where we can kind of extend some of the things that we're doing with the LSARP project, which hopefully by sometime this year we will have some kind of we'll kind of come on the webinar, on the town hall, and do a demo like we did in the previous town hall, and kind of talk about your project as well to the wider community, and give it the much the required exposure, I guess. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Akena. Yeah, that was great, and yeah, so this is I think we're seeing the development of more of these gateways and platforms and portals, and have developed created in WestGrid our own team, and Akena and Steve are experienced developers. So we're not going to know the science involved in any particular project, but we can certainly help underneath that to build up the database structures, all those kinds of things. So yeah, if you got something, please apply. I expect there'll be 1 or 2 that we can start off with in this first round, and then we'll see how that goes, and learn the lessons, and then have future rounds. So cool. Hopefully there are lots of applications. Right, moving on then. I usually do in these town halls a quick operations report. This will be really quick this time, since we've really only been about a month over Christmas since the last one, and it turns out to be pretty short. This is really good news. Not much, not many issues. Things are pretty smooth, and I think that's really good news. I mentioned that the last one. But with the upgrades to Cedar, introduction of SSDs on some of the file systems, all that shared file system issues that we were having, the re-architecting of Cedar's file systems, Beluga had similar kinds of issues. Shared file, when the shared file system goes down, the whole machine goes down. It is the single source of failure. And when the shared file system slows down, then jobs start failing and people can't log in and all that sort of stuff. And I think, touch wood, we have solved most of those issues. Great work by the national site teams. It's a lot of detailed work to try to understand why things don't work, things are slowing down, users see some issues. And at the moment, the stuff is pretty straightforward. So Graham, login problem, scheduler problem, relatively minor issues. And well, back in November, there was an unresponsive /project. I think Dave, that was a relatively minor one with some users pushing the system. Cedar, same kinds of things over January. The bad one was that January 3rd was where there was an unscheduled power outage just after the vacation, and all the nodes rebooted, so all jobs were lost. Yeah, we do occasionally have these power outages, and they do affect the systems, but we'll keep an eye on that. Most of the time, we have scheduled power outages and can make announcements, and that one was annoying. Similarly for Beluga, the Calco Quebec general purpose cluster, back in the autumn, there were various file system issues with dead disks and replacing drives. That's all kind of solved, and they seem now pretty smooth. Similarly, Niagara has been really pretty bulletproof, going well with relatively minor problems. So it's really good. I think this is the first time I've been able to get all 4 of the big clusters on one page. Usually there's 2 or 3 pages of outages that I have to go through. So this is good. And the Arbutus Cloud, almost the same kind of thing. Some issues with with the network, with the virtual networks and the control plane. So again, pretty minor, affecting some users, but not the whole system at all. So that's all good news. I didn't think over the last month I needed to put on any of the usage stats. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say about outages and maintenance. And I think it's good news. This is great. Of course, we've got lots of new equipment coming in. Maybe I'll just remind you that as part of that $500 million that I talked about earlier, we got a upfront extra chunk of $50 million because we really just don't have enough resources, and we're seeing such difficult times with the rack. That $50 million has been spent, and the new updates, increases to all the general purpose machines are in the middle of being installed. So I think Cedar's going to have another 30,000 cores or something. So some big increases. And as usual, I expect we can have some teething problems, but hopefully the guys will have those straightened out now that we've got the systems themselves in good shape. They'll be available for the April new rack year. Alex, do you want to go over our training opportunities? Yeah.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Next slide, please. Yes. So we continue with our biweekly webinars. We are going to have 9 webinars this term, and the topics are set. You can see all of them on this slide. So the page where you can actually get more details and register for individual events, if you want to have email notifications in your inbox, is right on this slide. So for past events, the same table, the same page links to the recordings, so you can actually view the slides, various materials, and eventually online video recordings as well. So if you have any suggestions for topics, please send an email to info@westgrid.ca. And yeah, so the webinars are every second week, Wednesday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Mountain. So please tune in if you find something interesting. Next slide, please. We do a lot of in-person training. This table shows the training done by WestGrid Central staff. We just recently partnered with the UBC Library Research Commons, and we'll be doing monthly workshops, in-person workshops at UBC Library, starting in early February, and hopefully this is going to be a permanent event. We also have a big event at SFU, so we call it WestGrid Spring School in early March, and this is going to be 4 days of intense training on various advanced research computing topics. And so the registration links for these events are on the same page that is shown on this slide. We also have even bigger events in June, so the usual summer schools. So this year we have a summer school in early June at the University of Manitoba, and then end of June UBC. So the summer schools are big events because they take 4 days, and they feature multiple streams, so usually 2 or 3 parallel streams, and usually somewhere around 12 to 15 either half-day or full-day courses. So please, if you are in Winnipeg or somewhere in the Vancouver area, check this out. Also, I want to mention that we have, so our partner research advanced computing teams, so RAC teams, advanced research computing teams, ARC teams at the WestGrid member institutions also do a lot of training. So the biggest event is probably the University of Alberta in Edmonton boot camps that take place 3 or 4 times a year. And there's actually a boot camp going on right now, this week and next week. And if you are in Edmonton, you still have a chance to catch some of the workshops next week. So the link is on the slide and on the same webpage as well. And also University of Saskatchewan, they just had 2 days of introductory HPC training this week, and then they're going to repeat the same 2-day workshop in early March. And yeah, so all links for all events are on this page that is shown on the slide. So please send us an email if you want a workshop or any sort of training, in-person training event at your university. And that's all for me.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I just to go back to this one, we've hired a new training assistant, Marie-Hélène Burley, and she's say, slotted in there I think 3 places to give some interesting talks about things like Julia and machine learning and such. So it's great to have her as part of the team now, as we're really getting into the swing of increasing our offerings around the whole training thing. Yeah, okay. So that's kind of the end of our standard WestGrid Town Hall stuff, and great bit of an overview of what we're doing. And of course, the Endrio stuff is, I think, the big thing going on. But along the way, commercial cloud has started to develop in quite a big way over the last few years, and WestGrid has been looking into some of that too. So I thought I would just rather informally and briefly mention some of the things we're doing and see if there's any interest around using commercial cloud. So there's been a real strong push from the cloud providers themselves, from the vendors, into HPC and ARC. And you might know that I think in the top 500, Amazon's occasionally had a machine up around 200 or so, where they create a virtual cluster, and it's right up there with the big guys. So it's happening, and we're seeing this development all over the place. As commercial cloud providers, of course, they're aiming quite a bit at commercial interests who are trying to work into high-performance computing and such. So I think, we don't know details. It's hard to see a lot of that. But I think, for instance, a lot of the oil and gas folks who do their big simulations are using the cloud, using a cloud as often as they can and paying for it. And of course, we're seeing the whole machine learning end of things just ballooning through the roof, and things like Kubernetes and scale-ups and such. The commercial clouds have some great advantages. So a couple of things I just specifically wanted to mention is that Compute Canada, rather informally the last couple of years, has developed something that called Magic Castle. That's by a guy named Félix-Antoine Fortin from Quebec. He's done a brilliant job. What it does is create a copy of Cedar, or equivalent to Cedar, on a cloud. It works fine on our Butus cloud, and it will work within any of the commercial clouds. That's kind of nice. I think you're probably all aware that the software stack that we have on all the machines are centrally distributed. So we have a team developing software, compiling, installing it, the central team for all the systems. This is great because that automatically gives you the capability of running in any cluster. In fact, in theory, you could run on your laptop. So doing this Magic Castle thing where one can create a Cedar lookalike ready to go with software stack looking essentially identical to Cedar or Graham. That's kind of neat. And I think currently a lot of the training sessions actually work with running a Magic Castle lookalike in our existing Compute Canada cloud. That's great because one can set up training accounts and guest accounts, all that kind of thing that for security reasons we don't usually do on Compute Canada itself, but we do it in a virtual cluster, and the cluster is then available for the session, and then at the end the cluster can be shut down. So it's kind of interesting the way this is developed, and maybe I'll try to get Felix to give us a demo at maybe the next town hall, because he's even included such cool things as using Google Voice to tell Google or tell Magic Castle what to create. Fun stuff. Compute Ontario, they are looking more classically at some big HPC applications and just looking at the performance and optimization in the cloud. So WARF, or the genomics application, out to 10,000 cores. So sort of classic stuff, see if the cloud can really do the kind of thing we do. I think the answer is becoming pretty clear. Most of these clouds can do, technically, the kind of things that we do. And UBC is looking at pilots for institutional use and research use. UBC has made a major commitment to ARC for their researchers, which is great. And part of that is to look at the commercial cloud and work with cloud providers. So things are happening. We also note that Canary is funding some cloud operations, cloud configure. They are acting as a broker for other departments to purchase chunks of cloud resources. So Canary's right in there too. And as far as I can tell, a number of universities, I've heard that McGill is doing some stuff in there, working with some California cloud stuff. And there are some big US initiatives going on as well. So stuff is happening, and it seems reasonable that Compute Canada and Endrio should be considering how commercial cloud can fit into our resources and our services. In WestGrid, we'd like to know a little more about what you, the users, might be doing now in the cloud. We know there are some who are already doing some work in commercial clouds. So we'll be doing a cloud survey, hopefully come out in February. We, of course, are discussing with the vendors, with the sales guys, and some interesting discussions. The one I want to just talk about briefly is this Rescale pilot. And Rescale, we found, is sort of an interesting reseller of cloud resources, of HPC cloud resources. They're focused or they're situated in California. They're a startup and having some success. The approach they take is that they're the ones who do bulk buys of cloud resources, and they can buy these cloud resources from multiple providers, and then they resell it through a job-based submission portal. The kind of thing that I liked about this is that their approach is that you create a job, design the job, whatever it's supposed to do, and then Rescale fires up a cluster which is created for that job. So our existing model is that Compute Canada has a great big cluster, 60,000, 70,000 cores, which is pretty uniform. It's pretty basic. We buy the cores and put it together. And then we have this vast range of jobs, from 1 core little ones to 10,000 core big ones, using GPUs, not GPUs, big memory, all that stuff. And they all get shoehorned into our clusters. And that's where the scheduler comes into play, and all the scheduling, hand-waving to make sure as many jobs as possible run. With Rescale, they use essentially the infinite resources of a cloud, of a commercial cloud, just to say, if you want 5 nodes and all of them should have 16 GPUs per node, well, fire up a cluster which has that. Kind of nice from our point of view, because then Amazon, Google, Microsoft are the ones who have to handle all the scheduling and how they fit that all in, not us. So very interesting. I like the approach, and we're wondering, and maybe we can do similar things actually in Compute Canada too. I put in the pink, of course, the big thing that always comes up is just the cost. And indeed, in Compute Canada, we use university data centers. We don't expect 100% uptimes, and we're cheap. Great, but cheap in this case means a lot cheaper than the cloud. The best I've seen are about cloud costs are about 1.5 times what our total costs are, and depending on the application, that can skyrocket to 4, 5, 6 times as expensive in the cloud. But of course, the cloud guys will tell you only pay per use. It's preemptible. There's spot markets, so there's lots of complications in there that we want to look at, and that's why a lot of us are doing these kinds of pilots to see what would be suitable, like suitable meaning cheap in the cloud, and which ones we should have our own on-premises stuff. So just for a couple of minutes, I had a lot of fun with Rescale. So the way you do it in Rescale is you specify inputs, so that you update all your data and scripts, and you kind of save a lot of that stuff into persistent storage. You specify software. Now, this is where Rescale has a quite focused model. they provide a set of software packages. And I think there's upwards of 100 or something now. But they compile them, print them up, put them in their software stack. So they are aimed at running standard applications over and over and over again, and they provide the applications. So yeah, you want NAMD, you want Gaussian, you want OpenFOAM, those guys, those are the kinds of standard applications that they provide. And they're open to us asking them to provide other applications, but that's their model. It's a very focused, rather limited model. It's tough to do all your own stuff in that model. There is some bring your own capability, but it's pretty limited. And then there's a post-processing thing where you can talk about the data you want to save and scripts to run. Then you define the hardware. And there's where the create the cluster that you want to run this job work through. And yeah, you can create anything you want. So they have access to all the standard types that Amazon or whatever would provide. Then you submit the job, Rescale starts the cluster up, and the job runs in that predefined environment. So a very focused approach. I had some issues with it. It's that predefined environment is hard to change. Rescale say that they're working on this problem, but it's hard to set up my environment with my libraries and my ways of working. It's really aimed at those standard applications. So I listed a few of them there. There is Python's available, so you can do some scripting, but again, it's not very generic. Data transfer is always an issue. If you got big data sets, you got to get them into the cloud, which is usually free, but then you got to get them out, and that might cost something. And the post-processing is pretty limited. But a nice thing about the bulk buy end of things is that Rescale handles all those interactions with the cloud providers, and they're buying a huge chunk, so they get a lot of the best pricing. And that's kind of nice when we think of a small operation like WestGrid. We could hand off a lot. So kind of fun working through this. Yeah, was not much here. Just the point at this point is that we do have some interest from Rescale and some small amounts of free compute. If there's anybody out there who would like to do some tests on this Rescale thing, if you're using one of these standard packages and you want to do something interesting with a specific hardware set, then give me a call, and we might be able to find a few extra resources through this Rescale. And of course, you have to put the effort into learning Rescale. It's not trivial, but we'd want us to do some tests around it and see how it satisfies your requirements. But at the moment, this has been just an internal investigation, so it'd be great to have a couple of real runs to do. So if you're interested, go for it. Give me a call. Cool. Any questions on that one? Any questions at all? We've kind of reached the end at that point. Nope, not much. All good? Yeah, so it's off to the new year and the new term. And RAC is ahead of us. I'm heading to Toronto in 2 weeks' time for the resource allocation competition face-to-face, where we work through everything. It's going to be rough again. Even with all this new gear that we're getting, we're still going to be way under what we've been asked for. But that's we'll get those out, and the announcements will go out in March. So I think we're done.
That's great. Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, any other questions there? Good. Then feel free to get in touch with me. Okay, thanks everybody. See you.